held by ARIN, facilitated by in-person and remote participation. We hold these for 2 days at the ARIN public policy meetings and at other forums where the Board of Trustees asks. I'd like to welcome the fact that it's not just the people in this room, it's our remote participants. We have a webcast, live transcript, downloadable meeting material, and online chat rooms so they can participate. Okay, reminder, the chair, in this case Dan, will moderate the discussion so everyone can speak and be heard. State your name and affiliation when you approach the microphone, and please comply with the rules and courtesies outlined in the discussion guide. Dan, could you hold up the discussion guide? You have one of these in paper. They're available at the front of the room. They're also online for the online participants. Okay, seated up here is myself, Paul Anderson, who's our board vice chair and treasurer, Dan Alexander, who's the AC chair, and Kevin Bloomberg, who's the AC vice chair, and we have Jabber volunteers, Kevin and David Farmer. Where's David Haddon there, who will be helping us moderate the Jabber rooms. Okay, we're going to do a few things today. We have an update on the AC activities, which will be given by Dan, and then we have 7 policy discussions. 3 of them are recommended draft policies. These literally have the opportunity in the near future to be adopted and could end up in the policy resource manual and be used by ARIN for how we administer the regional registry. We have 4 draft policies. Those are policies that are still being worked by the community and the ARIN Advisory Council, and when they get to a state where they're ready to be recommended, they'll become recommended draft policies. So, having given you an idea of the day, I first want to turn things over to Dan so he can give a presentation on the AC activities. Go ahead, Dan. Do you have slides? No. I know how to get so there. Let's see, it's amazing how it works. I have to reboot right.
Morning, all. As John mentioned, name is Dan Alexander. I am the chair this year of the Advisory Council, which is new because John Sweeting, who was on the AC for a number of years, took care of us as chair, so I am the new guy. There's 15 of us. We're elected to 3-year terms, and we're tasked with facilitating this policy development process. So we're here to really get your feedback and listen to what you have to say about the different proposals that are being discussed, what you think is a good idea, which are bad, how you would like to change them. There's 5 of us here, as John covered. We have 7 proposals to discuss today. 3 of them are recommended. So this is at a policy state where the text is pretty solidified, and if everybody agrees and thinks this is a good idea, this is a proposal that we would typically move to the next step and recommend to the board for adoption. 4 of the policies aren't at that stage yet. They're just draft proposals. So we're here to discuss them and get more feedback as to how they would be changed, what you think is good and bad about each. There's also a policy breakout room after this discussion where if people wanted to meet on a one-on-one basis and discuss this further, that is available to them. And with that, we can jump right into the first one.
Who's got that? Should be 2014.
Yeah, David?
Where's the? I go first.
Oh, you go first.
I go first. Stand by, David. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to do the introduction to the recommended draft policy 2014-1. And this is out of region use. So history of this, it started out in December 2013 as ARIN Policy Proposal 192. The Shepherds are Milton Mueller and Tina Morris. It's been presented at a few places. It's been presented at NANOG 60, 61, and 62. It was also presented at the ARIN 33 and ARIN 34 meetings. It advanced to recommended draft policy in December 2014. The text is online in your discussion guide. Staff understanding. So, the policy would allow out-of-region use of ARIN-issued resources as long as the requesting organization is presently an ARIN registry customer and currently using the equivalent of a /22 IPv4 block, /44 IPv6 block, or an ASN on infrastructure physically located in the ARIN region. An officer attestation would be required to verify that the resource request being made to ARIN is not a duplicate of one made to another RIR. So this literally would allow someone to come to ARIN and say, I need additional address space for my operations in some place outside the ARIN region. So outside the US, the Caribbean, and Canada. And we would issue address space for that purpose, presuming they were an existing ARIN registry customer. Currently, we require justify need for resources to be based specifically within the ARIN region. If you show up and say, I have a need and it's on another continent outside the ARIN region, we don't consider that a valid basis for issuing address space. This would change that. When processing a resource address for use in another region, ARIN staff would include any address space registered through the other RIR. So if you had a block in another region and you're applying for address space in that region, we would consider the address space that you have in another region. This is new and it might be a little bit complicated for us to implement. It means we're reviewing utilization of address space outside, because if you want address space for use in another region, we would now have to talk about why you need that address space. We're pretty familiar with how address space is used in the ARIN region, and sometimes local regulation, local infrastructure, dynamics affect how people have to use address space. I don't know whether the regulations of the other 150 economies in the world might affect address space usage. So reviewing whether you need address space in another region is, like as I said, new ground. The policy would be placed in NRPM as section 2.17. I'm going to go through the legal assessment, and because this is a new ground, there's a few bullets for that. ARIN Council supports the issuance of resources to entities in the ARIN region that need number resources that will be used in this region and the remainder of the world. ARIN currently issues resources to those needs based on needs methodology. The proposed policy now requires that there be a 22 in the ARIN service region, or B6 or ASN. Once that exists, it allows all of the recipients' needs met by their demand outside the service region. There's also now a requirement that they be an existing ARIN customer, which helps. So these are improvements from the last time we reviewed the policy. However, there remains an issue in that we would be allocating resources entirely for use outside the region. And the fact that we're doing that, and those resources could be obtained by another RIR, presuming they had them, means we're actually changing ARIN's mission to some extent. We're changing the scope of our service and what we do. Because historically, we've turned down organizations who come to us and say, I need an address block entirely for use, where that use is entirely outside of ARIN's region. This is interesting because the registry system's been around 15 years. It might be time for it to evolve. But we're not doing that as a discussion with the entire global community in the 5 RIRs. We're doing it through one policy proposal. And so that has concern because we don't know the full implications. It's inconsistent in particular with one policy, which is the Internet Coordination Policy 2, which is an ICANN policy. And ICANN 2 and ICP 2, when you're establishing a new RIR, says that that new RIR has a service region, and that service region should be exclusive for that RIR. Obviously, this policy implies that we would not be following that. Now, ICP2 is for the creation of a new RIR. It doesn't say anything about an existing RIR, but if you imagine that there's a constraint to creation, that you have a service region, then it can't go away an hour later. It's got to exist for some amount of time. The question is, does it exist for 15 years? How long does an RIR have a stable service region? ARIN can't perform the business functions in this if the requesters are in certain countries. Because we're operating in the United States, we have US law, and we have compliance with it. There are some countries, literally, even if they made the request, we would be unable to fulfill. And we just note that regardless of the policy, we have to comply with the law where we're operating. Staff noted that it would have a significant resource impact, would occur within 5 to 6 months after ratification by the board. We would need to update internal guidelines. We do staff training. We need to figure out the process for external reviewing need that's outside the region. And there's some engineering to support out-of-region business rules. I'm now going to turn it over to David Farmer, who will do the presentation by the ARIN Advisory Council.
Okay, so just for full disclosure, besides presenting this, I'm the original author. However, the current text has no resemblance to what I started with. This is a good thing, actually, but okay. So summary. There actually is one piece of text. Problem statement's next. Sorry. So John gave an excellent summary. This basically just reinforces all that. And the important one here is right now, as currently drafted, there is no requirement that you can actually have solely out-of-region need being fulfilled by ARIN. And this is something we need to talk about. And I'd really like to see some discussion on that. Is that needed, or can we move along? But the important piece here, that this is text that didn't change, is the problem statement. And that is, the current policy neither clearly forbids nor clearly permits out-of-region use. It's pretty much moot on the subject. There's no guidance. Newbies come in, and this is a question they always ask. And I've heard this asked and get so many questions about it. But staff has been counting out-of-region use as in-region under certain circumstances, dealing with when the prefix is routed in the region and various other things that aren't clearly defined anywhere. And so this adds to the ambiguity, personally. So, summarizing the staff and legal review, which is in your documents here, the change to the text since the last version, adding an in-region nexus has improved the proposal. There's still issues concerning ICP2. Summarize the council's fundamental issue is, hey, is this going to create more fraud? As John mentioned, there's questions about how this, current text, how this deals with the other RIRs. This is an important question, but first, before we get to that, we got to decide, is this what we want to do? Because the easy answer is to not create that problem if we can fix the text. But we got to, as a community, we got to decide what we want to do. The important thing here, though, is under the staff and legal, is that there's no legal reasons to prevent implementation currently. If this is what we really want to do, we might need to coordinate with the other RIRs, but there's no legal reason we can't do this. A little about ICP2, as John mentioned, it defines the creation, the criteria for creating a new RIR. It's ICANN policy. We can't just unilaterally change this if we want to. And then we need to talk about do we need to make some changes here to bring us more in line? The one thing that I will add, though, is that ICP2 has a whole number of pieces to it, but one of the things it doesn't do is it doesn't directly talk about how resources are used. It's about the creation of a new RIR. So there's a number of issues here on the slide here. Scarcity is driving the free pool runout is driving scarcity, driving people that wouldn't necessarily come to ARIN are coming to ARIN. This is what's driven a lot of this. And that was it. Let's go back.
Okay. Hi. I'll be your lovely chair for the next few minutes. At this time, we would open the mics and invite any comments, discussion, feedback on the proposal. Front microphone.
Good morning.
And as always, please remember to identify your name and organization.
Lee Howard, Time Warner Cable. There are 3 sets of addresses, or I guess there are 4 sets of number resources that this would affect. It would affect autonomous system numbers, presumably, because I believe it says numbers, not addresses, but I may not be reading close enough. Hand wave. It would affect IPv6 addresses, not a big deal. I'm not terribly concerned with conservation of IPv6. It would affect transfer requests, but I think with the inter-RIR transfer policy, I think that's mostly covered. And I'd like some clarification there if we need this to cover anything not covered by the transfer policy. And post-ARIN free pool depletion, it would also cover waiting list requests, which would presumably get allocated from IANA return space. And that's a set of address space that I would be very worried about in this regard. So there's the technical concern that I have. I'm also very concerned about violating the principles of ICP2, because if ARIN can say, we're the RIR for the world, then why do we even need regional registries anymore? Why couldn't any other actor who wanted to start up an internet registry start up an internet registry overlapping ARIN service area or any other RIR service area? I don't like that precedent.
So there's 2 points there. Would you like to address number 1? I don't know if, John, you want to do number 2? Or did you want to?
I guess the question I have is, statement I have is, those are very valid points. Do you have suggestions on what you would like to see done about it? Like for the...
Let's start with the first point.
Yeah.
Comment. Because I'd like John to feedback on the second before we get too deep.
So I will go ahead and say that I think it would be a very bad idea to implement this proposed policy prior to free pool exhaustion.
Okay.
And I may want to hear John's answer before I voice an opinion on the policy.
Yeah, that would
Overall,
be very
completely.
useful if John would like to.
Could you, for sake of clarity, restate your second point?
Second point was about ICP2, and if we violate the principles of ICP, not the principles, but the sort of the guidelines, the ideas behind ICP2, then what's to prevent anybody else who thinks that they ought to start up a registry overlapping the service region of an RIR from doing so? I can think of some people who might be interested in doing that.
So recognize the registry system operates because all of us are operating one registry, and at any given moment, a given address block is under the administration of a single RIR, or it's in the free pool at the IANA, one of the reserve pools. So as long as all of the registries coordinate, and there's no 2 registries working on a single address block, therefore invalidating the uniqueness principle. As long as the registries all coordinate and we know it's one unified set of 2 to the 32nd bits, for example, then we can maintain uniqueness and everything's fine. ICP2 established the process 15 years ago for establishing a new RIR. And it didn't say how RIRs change service regions. It doesn't say, it says service regions shouldn't overlap for purposes of avoiding confusion. But note that we have the RIRs because of a convenience to the community. You want to work with an RIR who speaks your language. You want to have one that operates in your time zone. So while it was seen the best way to do that is to have 5 or have the RIRs, and then eventually we added another one, ended up with 4, then we ended up with 5 RIRs. Well, that was seen as the best way to do it. That policy hasn't been revisited in years. The question that you're asking is, if we changed and we started servicing people outside the region, would we be violating ICP2? It's not clear ICP2 is applicable at anything other than RIR stand-up. It has no provisions for ongoing aspects.
So I invite others to approach the mic if they wish to comment, but I'd like to give you an opportunity to respond.
My concern is that it could establish a precedent for others who would want to establish a new internet registry, and what would prevent anybody from saying, let's go to an all-national registry forum, and there are reasons other than uniqueness for having regionally based registries. So those are my concerns, and I think, so I guess because what you want to hear is, do you support or
Maybe we should continue.
Yes, let's continue. Next,
Should we speak louder so they can hear us?
go ahead, sir.
Robert Duncan, Merit Network. I'm struck with the fact that this is, or should be, in my eyes, primarily directed at an ARIN member who's not a member at another RIR that wants to use a little bit of resource in the rest of the world, right? If it's a multinational with registration in multiple RIRs, why don't they just transfer some space and claim it in the other RIR? Right? That would seem a cleaner policy to me. And I guess that's what I'm saying is I think this should state that as a goal, right?
And would you be supportive if that change was made, or is that the only?
Yes, I would, because I think it would be important for someone that's ARIN-based, an ARIN-only member, and has a little bit of activity in rest of world to be able to do that without having to go register with some other RIR.
But not willing to support as written then?
I wouldn't state that.
Okay. Did you want to address this question?
No,
Or just
I
take it as feedback? Okay. Thank you for the feedback. Are there anyone else who would like to speak on this? And I'll speak slowly so that hopefully the webcast will come back up. I don't suspect, did we have any remote participant before we cut them off?
We do have some, but no questions.
Some comments?
The last comment was asking to summarize Mr. Howard's remarks that were during the audio off, but
Okay.
not the transcript.
Go ahead, sir, for our microphone.
Mike Sinatra, yes, the audio is back up on the webcast. So
The audio is
just
back
FYI.
up. Thank you for that. So this is the last call for comments. We'll just give a few extra seconds in case the remote participants would like to ask any questions or queries. But again, we'll close the microphones in a few seconds. David wanted to make a quick comment himself.
If there's anybody out there that deals with multiple RIRs and has any comment on this, and it would be helpful. Thanks.
Which leads me to my next point that if you had comments that you didn't want to make here or questions or something that comes, please feel free to approach the AC either here at the meeting in the next day or two, or you can always drop a line on the PPML mailing list. But going last call for microphones, at least in the room, going once, twice, closed, and just give a few extras. Anyone look like they're typing online? Okay, I think we're going to close that discussion. Thank you very much. The feedback has been received by the AC.
Okay, I want to move right along, and we'll now talk about the next policy, which is recommended draft policy 2014-17, change utilization requirements from last allocation to total aggregate. History of this. This started as ARIN policy proposal 209 in May 2014. The AC Shepherds, Andrew Dull and Owen DeLong, was presented at the PPC at NANOG 61 and 62. It was presented at ARIN
4, against 0. Total number of people in the room, including meeting room and remote, 57. This input is being immediately passed on to the AC for their consideration. Thank you.
Very good. We're going to move on to the next policy proposal. Looking for an update. Remote audio? Still no audio? Kevin, do they have audio?
Just came back, yeah.
Just came back. Okay, very good. I feel much better. Okay, final recommended draft policy is 2014-19, new MDN allocation based on past utilization. It originated as policy proposal 2011 from August 2014. The Shepherds are Kathy Aronson and Andrew Dull. It was presented at ARIN at NANOG 62 and at ARIN 34. It advanced recommended draft policy in December. It's online in your discussion guide. The policy proposes to change NRPM 4.5, multiple discrete networks, bullet 7, to add additional qualifying criteria. Currently, sites applying under MDN will qualify for minimum allocation specified in policy or under immediate need. This policy adds the option for new MDNs, new multiple discrete networks, with at least a year's worth of historical utilization to request up to a 3-month supply of addresses. So presently, there's only two options. You either get the minimum, which in our policy is /24, or you have to show immediate need, which is usage of the address space within 30 days. This says if you have a historical run rate and you can demonstrate the historical run rate, then you can request a 3-month supply using that historical run rate. If implemented, staff would require the organization to show a direct correlation between the demonstrated 1-year utilization and the discrete network 3-month need. The policy requires an applicable 1-year utilization in order to qualify. This means that it would need to be, you can't give us a random utilization rate. It has to be for the area that you're servicing with the MDN. It does not create any legal issues. It would have minimum resource impact. It's estimated the implementation would occur within 3 months after ratification by the Board of Trustees. We need to update internal guidelines and staff training. I'll now turn it over to the AC to give policy proposal presentation 2014-19, Kathy Aronson.
Hi. I'm at the microphone again. Super exciting. Yeah, so how do we move this forward? John talked about the problem statement. So the reason this came about is because an organization, some folks in the community felt that an organization should be able to get more than the minimum for a new discrete network. And the thing that we found out in the process of working on this proposal is it's really not a change from what ARIN actually does in practice, because if you have a 1-year utilization rate, then it's not a new multiple discrete network, and if you can show it's not actually a new one or it's in the same market as an old one, you can actually use the 1-year utilization to justify it. So it turns out it's somewhat of a no-op as far as what ARIN does in practice, and if you really do have a brand new discrete network, you don't have a historic run rate to use to justify the 3-month utilization, so you should actually get the minimum. So the question, anyway, this is the change in the policy text. John talked about all of that. So really the question that I want to ask of you all is whether you feel that this is a useful clarification to the policy to have this text in there, or whether we should just go back to, leaving it for just new discrete networks, because it really doesn't change what ARIN does in practice. I think we have questions, yeah. So that's what we're really looking for as the advisory council from folks, and maybe you could comment on that or ask questions if I'm not clear, or just general crickets.
So we'll open the microphones now. We'd love feedback on this. I'm just curious, just so I know, are we back, are we getting audio again? Good, that's good to see. Please approach the microphones. This is a policy that is possibly being moved to last call, so
Wow. Okay.
any remote participation? Perhaps the lack of feedback is just goes to the stellar presentation, just so clear. We'd really appreciate, though, if you could come up and give any kind of feedback. Thank you, sir.
If you're gonna beg. Lee Howard, Time Warner Cable. This seems, especially since it is congruent with current existing operational practice, I don't see anything objectionable there. I'm curious about, I don't think the proposed text says this, but my only concern would be in terms of a gaming situation. I would assume, I would hope that the new discrete network would be similar to previous discrete networks and not a completely new line of business being started up. And then, John's nodding, good.
Kathy first, and then John.
I think the author of the proposal originally felt that if he had a discrete network and he split it into two, and then, and he assumed that if he did that, those would be new discrete networks, but in Aaron's eyes, those are actually existing discrete networks and they have a track record. So he wrote the policy in order to try to help this situation where he'd split one in half, and it turns out that all the right things would happen if he did that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. My use cases were a regional ISP adds a new region, or a data center or cloud hosting company opens a new data center. Those would be analogous lines of business. But if a content company went into the internet provisioning business, that would be a completely new line of business, and previous usage wouldn't be
If I could speak.
wouldn't be analogous.
Right, and I think,
That's pretty obvious
is John going to say?
John wanted to get in first.
Presently, those are handled by assigning the minimum, or they demonstrate their entry into that new business and they use the immediate need policy. We wouldn't accept a non-synonymous business history for predicting an entirely unrelated business.
Good, thanks.
Did you want to?
No.
Okay. Okay. Last call for questions, either remote or in person. Please approach a microphone with due speed if you'd like to comment. Seeing none, we'll close the microphones, and it's been requested that we take a poll of the room on this. Again, as a reminder, there's a desire to take this to last call after this public policy consultation. So similar to the last one, I will ask for a poll of the room. First, those who are in favor of the AC moving it to last call, and those who are opposed. So I'd ask all those in the room who are in favor to raise your hand nice and high. This is our last recommended draft policy of the day, so please keep it up. Got it. Now you may lower it. Thank you. And now those who are opposed, please raise your hand nice and high. You got the one up here? Okay. Two. Okay. All right. In one moment for the results, as we also poll the online audience. Oh. Thank you, sir. On the matter of 2014-19, on the question to advance, 10 in favor, 2 against, total number of people in the room still and online still 59. This will be passed to the AC for their consideration. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Okay, moving right ahead. We are doing very well for time. We're going to fit in discussion of draft policy 2014-6, which is not a recommended draft, it's just a draft policy. So I'm going to have the AC just present their status on it. Go ahead.
Good morning, good morning, everybody. So we're going to be discussing ARIN 2014-6, remove operational reverse DNS text. We have changed this from remove section 7.1 based on feedback from the last, we don't have this screen. John? There's,
Hello?
do I have to do anything on here?
Go for, oh, sorry. Let's go for that lower left, sorry. There we go.
Thank you. So, let's start here. So, at the last meeting in Baltimore, a lot of the discussion was centered around the fact that we were removing Section 7.1, which was a V4 policy, where we also had this in V6, and it was kind of, I think silly is the wrong word, but if we're going to if we're going to remove an operational need for V4 when it comes to in ARPA, maybe doing this for V6 at the same time, getting the community's feedback on both of them would be more appropriate. So we've changed the title of this and included the fact that we will be taking out both 7.1 and 6.5.6. So why is there an issue? We have a policy we have a draft here that is basically looking at the fact that we have text in the NRPM that requires internet service providers to put in address in ARPA addresses for all of their customers. This is operational. It's not necessarily enforceable. It doesn't say what the enforcement is. There's a number of issues, and the question is, has it really been used? If we're going to look at, the new people coming to the community and looking at our glorious NRPM text, will this confuse them, cause concern, or is this something that we need to include at this point? Is it something complicated that we need to include? It's not based on any RFC, and right now it's really just an operational practice. So the author has asserted this should just be taken out of the NRPM. And the policy statement is incredibly complicated. It's just completely strike 7.1 and 6.5.6. So it's predominantly a cleanup policy. Like I said, it was at the last meeting in Baltimore, and since then we've added in those two changes. And I'd love some feedback from the community, especially operators at the community at the table here. If you have any feedback from Baltimore since the change, or if you're new to this discussion, do you have any input in this policy?
If I have to approach a microphone, you guys have to. Come on. Rear microphone, sir.
So Michael Sinatra, ESNet. I'm.
Could I get your name and the organization, sir?
That's what Michael Sinatra,
Oh, sorry,
ESNet meant.
it's a little hard hearing up here, so.
And I'm mutter anyway, so. Michael Sinatra from ESNet, the Energy Sciences Network of the U.S. Department of Energy. I support the policy, or support getting rid of these two pieces. I especially was amused in looking at section 6.5.6 when making address assignment, the organization must delegate to an assignee organization upon request the responsibility to manage the reverse lookup zone that corresponds to the assigned address. This is not only specifying operational practice, it's actually specifying the business model of what service you provide and how you provide it. So I actually think that does not belong in the NRPM, and I support the policy.
And you do not support the policy. Any question or feedback?
I don't support these things being in here. I support the proposal.
Proposal, but not the. I do apologize for that rear microphone. I'm having a little hard time hearing, so. It is, I am. Front microphone.
Lee Howard, Time Warner Cable, and author of Draft Howard's IPv6 RDNS, talking about how we do reverse DNS in IPv6. Basically saying that you don't, or that's one recommendation is that for a residential ISP, providing PTRs is meaningless because they don't provide any information, and you can't pre-populate a reverse zone in V6 the way you can in V4. Sorry, I rambled a little bit. Read the draft. The So what I missed here, and I didn't have time to read right now, is this ARIN delegating to responsibility for reverse with the addresses, or is this the organization receiving the delegation further delegating to its parties?
John's going to
Repeat that slowly.
So does this proposal affect ARIN's delegation of reverse to ARIN members or ARIN delegatees, or does this affect the ISPs who receive addresses being required to delegate to their?
Right. This doesn't change ARIN services at all. We'll continue to provide the same services, same delegation. This just removes a statement of an implied obligation in the policy text on our customers.
Okay.
Okay?
So,
We don't change the services. We'll still delegate, yes.
so ARIN still delegates, and if the because I remember there being a policy discussed many years ago about lame delegations that ARIN delegates to the member or the the organization, and that if that server is to which they delegate is lame, then ARIN can remove that delegation, which would be a good idea because lameness is bad. I just want to make sure that we're leaving that intact.
Right. This doesn't change the services we provide. Note that lane delegation, testing, and removal is a separate topic.
Great. Okay. That's what I wanted to know. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sorry. So on that basis, yeah, I have no problem with removing those.
Support. Understood. Thank you. Any remote participation, David? David? Any other?
There's nothing.
Nothing there. Last call for the microphone. Please approach now if you'd like to make a comment. Front microphone when you're ready, sir.
David Huberman from Microsoft. I'm the author of the policy proposal. And the reason I proposed it, I've said a few times now, there's some important DNS rules that the RIRs have enacted with respect to reverse. Rules in V4, for example, that if you are the registrant of a whole unit of a /16, that ARIN and the other IRs will only delegate the /16 as essentially a parent zone in the inatter.arpa tree. And you therefore, as the registrant, are responsible for individual subzones, /24s typically. There are similar rules in IPv6. These rules are very important. They should be well known. I've asked ARIN a few times to please participate in the RFC series to make this an RFC, as it's an important operational practice of the RIRs. But it doesn't belong in the NERPM, which in my opinion should say, do you get resources? How do you qualify? Yes or no? And it is not about operational practice or much less, as Mr. Sinatra notes, business policy.
Thank you. Rear microphone, please.
Hi, I'm Nicole Black, Software Technologies. So I'm kind of new to this issue, and I'm sure it's probably been thought over, but also I do agree these should go, they're kind of oddly shimmed in there and weird, but are there any possible negatives that have been considered for if people don't feel compelled because it's written in here to properly maintain our DNS?
I'm having trouble hearing.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time. Would you mind coming to this microphone at the front? I do apologize. We seem to be able to hear you. And not just you, obviously, the previous speakers too.
Apologies for that.
Apologies for... If you could just
you could
repeat,
do it one more
please.
time.
Just maybe knock that and bend it down. Thank you.
Yes, so basically boiled down to all of that is, are there any possible negative consequences for people, y'all said this probably hasn't even actually been enforced anywhere, but if people don't feel compelled because it's written down to properly maintain these,
I believe you're asking, is making this change have the potential for negative consequences? Okay. And so this will be a very an interesting statement in humility for ARIN. I'm not sure the presence of the current language in NRPM meaningfully affects the behavior of anyone. So its removal probably also won't meaningfully affect the behavior of anyone. In fact, if it was believed that the statement there actually made a significant impact, then there might be a different approach. But I think, as people have indicated, it's the wrong place for this type of statement. It really is the type of operational practice that operators should be talking about at their forum.
I agree, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Yeah, Michael, if you don't mind, I apologize.
Yeah, I just, Michael Sinatra, ES. I just wanted to clarify my position also. It's the same as John's. This should be written down somewhere. It can be written as part of the BCOP process, as part of the RFC process, but it shouldn't be an NRPM. I think that's really what we're saying. I think that's what David's point is also.
Thank you for the clarification. Front microphone again.
Joe Provo, Google, echoing Michael, echoing David. Yes, yes, yes. Not NANOG. Thank you very much. Support, support, support. And echoing David about maybe ARIN's participation in the RFC process too, if the for the V4 elements, if they're of interest to continue to pursue it and recommend the practice.
Thank you for that comment. Last call for comments, and then look for any online. David? Nope.
Nope.
No online, no in person. So thank you. That was good to get a little bit of vigor going there. So thank you for your feedback.
Thank you. Okay. We're actually doing very well for time. We're going to move promptly ahead. Next up is a discussion of draft policy 2014-21, which is modification of the CI pool size per section 4.4. And sorry. Thank you. Draft 1414, removing needs test for small IPv4 transfers. And I have Dan Alexander. Is that? No? Okay.
So there wasn't any staff. There were no staff. Right. Okay, got it. Not a problem.
There.
Yeah. Yep. Got it. Yeah. Good to go. Not a problem. All right. For this one, the Shepherds weren't available for the presentation. And it's really just, they just wanted to provide kind of an update on the discussion, because what this proposal is proposing, that's redundant, is basically for smaller transfers that the needs test that staff would perform would be removed. There's been a lot of conversation on the mailing lists and at different meetings, and there's a fair amount of disagreement as to where that demarcation would be placed, whether it's a 16 that's in the original text or whether it should be lower and possibly move that threshold up progressively as we got better feedback or experience from what the impacts might be. There's also a fair amount of discussion around the premise of the proposal, because originally the problem statement of the proposal suggested that there was too much of a delay in staff processing for these transfers because of this needs test. And in reality, the needs review is actually a smaller portion of the time that staff spends on these requests, because more of the time is actually spent verifying the requester and who they are. And also since then, the queue of work that ARIN staff has been working on, they've reduced that queue back to normal kind of wait times for requests. So the Shepherds are really looking at possibly either a complete rewrite of this or really reviewing the problem statement as to whether this is necessary. But we're definitely open for feedback here, but they wanted to let you know that a rewrite of this is likely coming, but we're definitely always looking for input as to how it should be rewritten. Be very curious if people think this is a good idea, and if so, do they like this kind of a threshold? Do we want to go down this path? So input is always welcome. Any thoughts? Any questions about the proposal? No? You want to jump into the next one? Sure. All right.
Any comments? No, seeing no comments, we'll move on to the next policy. Okay. Okay. Next up is Draft Policy 2014-21, modification of the CI pool size per section 4.4. And this is also a draft policy, and it is, as such, I'm just going to have the Shepherd come up and speak to it. And we have Dave Farmer right behind me doing that.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So, problem statement. We're seeing some growth in IXPs due to some efforts by this community. This is a good thing. There's currently a 16 that has been reserved, and this is looking to expand that. Changes the reservation from a 16 to a 15, adding an additional 16. There's only been the 35 24s of the 256 in the current 16. That's less than a 14% utilization of that. There will be additional resources coming in March 1st and September from the IANA pool. This, in both cases, should be well over a 16. So even if the free pool exhausts prior to implementation of this policy, there'll be resources available to implement it. In theory, the policy statement is pretty clear, simple. It, in the full text, you'll see the text that's being removed in the full text in the discussion guides, and it's basically changing that to a 15. So discussion, is the additional 16 needed and justified? I just want to make sure everybody realizes we've only used 35 of the current ones, so we're adding an additional 256 / 24 equivalents, so this is putting aside a chunk, but again, in the total scheme of things, a /16 isn't that much. There's been moderate support on PPML, no opposition. Based on feedback, we'll probably take this to to recommended draft status prior to ARIN 35.
So now would be a great opportunity to get wording or other changes so that hopefully when it gets to San Francisco, it will be in a polished form. Front microphone.
Can you back up to the first slide?
Can we get your name and affiliation first?
Martin Hannigan.
Thank you. That one, sir?
Nope. The one, this one. Back.
This one?
That one. So out of the 35 24s used, how many of them were used in 2014 versus previously?
This is, I believe, Leslie
Leslie,
will need to
approach
answer
the
that
mic.
for sure, but I believe that's
The majority of them?
that's the 35 since the 16 was reserved. Right, 2013 and 2014 then.
But how many of the 35 were issued in 2014? Most of them?
Leslie.
We have to get
Most
a
of them.
breakdown.
On the next point, additional resources will come from the IANA recovery, blah, blah, blah. I'm not sure what that has to do with this. With respect to the pool, doesn't this pool share with other critical infrastructure? It's not just IXPs, it's GTLD and
It's
whatnot.
critical infrastructure of all types.
And how much of this address space has been claimed by the GTLDs? The new GTLDs?
How many of the CI allocations, I don't think we've had a GTLD come through. I don't recall one.
And I think the first wave of ICANN GTLD approvals was on the order of 900, and the next wave is going to kick in.
I don't know.
You mean
actually,
this the current round?
The current round was 900 approved.
I think it's over 900
Yeah,
by
over
now.
900, and they've been out for about 4 months, operational for
Over
about
a year
4
now.
months.
They've been-
Over a year now.
They
Well,
delegated
they're
last year
slowly
in
releasing them into the
Right.
into the DNS. And the next window for new GTLD applications opens, I think, in another 6 to 12 months.
I don't believe they've announced a second round, but I'm not sure the
The intention was 3 years, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Okay, so Obviously, I support the policy as written. Also, I know that while Dave Temkin's not here, the Open Acts Association, a standards body with respect to interconnection, supports this policy as well as written. I believe that there was some discussion on the ARIN list related to this. You can take that or leave it, but there is support from others, including trade associations. Not sure where you want to go with this, Dave, but I think there's more than adequate support to move this forward, and I think that the pool size, at least the utilization right now, is a red herring with respect the non-performance of the GTLDs. Perhaps the better way to go, if you don't want to increase it from a 16 to a 15, is to just remove the access of the GTLDs and dedicate it to the critical infrastructure that is claiming it.
Can I just get clarification? I know
Yeah.
you mentioned the OIX. That was
Yeah.
based on a consensus from your
The board.
mailing list that they have?
And
It's
the
not a board adopted policy of the OIX.
There's no, we
That's
don't write
understood.
number policy, so.
Understood. Did you have a question for?
No, I have a clarification.
Okay, just 1 second then, just so we can just, you want a response so that.
So, Marty, these points aren't trying to argue against it. It's mostly making sure full disclosure,
Sure.
making sure that everybody realizes where we're at.
No, understood.
Yep.
And they just weren't clear enough, so thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment and support.
Okay.
Remote?
Marty, sorry.
Oh, sorry, is this a remote or is this?
No, this is
Okay.
me, something specific. GTLDs are excluded from this specific pool. And the last part of section 4.4, and this was added in a while back, was ICANN sanctioned GTLD operators may specify up to a 23 from the free pool or transfer, but not from the above reservation. So GTLD operators are actually excluded from
But
this.
the pool is shared, if I remember correctly, and I don't have a guide to, let me just
That's,
look real
I'm,
quick.
I'm reading from the NRPM specifically.
It's not
So-
shared with anything? Well, I'm talking to them. So it's not shared with anything at all?
No, there are other critical infrastructure, but the specific concern about GTLD and the numbers.
Okay, but it is
are-
shared.
Correct.
Okay, that's my point. Thanks.
Thank you. Other comments? Front microphone when you're ready.
Lee Howard, Time Warner Cable. I disagree that a /16 is negligible. There are lots of people who need /16s and smaller, and reserving another one, there just aren't that many left. The next IANA allocations, I believe there's a /13 and then a /14, and they're getting smaller and smaller. So that's a significant chunk of that. And from reading that second bullet, I haven't seen a demonstration that this is needed. 14% is used in a year and a half. Yeah, sorry. That looks like there's enough to last for another 7 years, at which point V4 is dead. So I oppose.
Understood. Thank you. Approach the microphone. I see. Go ahead, sir.
Martin Hannigan. So, but Lee's wrong. It's not 35% in 2 years. It's actually the majority of this last year. And if it doesn't get used, rewrite the policy in a year or two and take back a 16. I think that you'll find that the growth rate probably maps out reasonably to 3 years to some significant amount of utilization. In the last 4 months alone, I think we saw 7 new IXPs come on the radar and significant growth in others. There's a major expansion happening in the San Francisco Bay Area with one. There's another that there's a few announcing in Chicago. So I think the ramp rate is probably reasonable, but if it turns out to be a dud, take it back. Take it back in a year. Take it back in a year and a half if it doesn't map out. But I think, and don't forget, the pool is shared. And perhaps the rewrite, if we don't, again, what I said earlier was, if we don't want to increase it to a 15, then remove the other users from the pool and make access to it smaller. That's a reasonable compromise, in my opinion.
Thank you, Martin. Just hold on
Marty.
one sec. Martin, hold on
Hey,
one
Marty.
second.
Just a question, because
Yeah.
one of the things that came up in the discussions is,
Yeah.
it's true what you're saying, that if you didn't need it, we could take it back.
Right.
But we are going to run into a scenario where the free pool will deplete. So we're looking at, in setting this 16 aside, you're going to have possibly a dozen or X number of possibly small providers
Yeah.
who are going to hit the wall sooner than if this 16 were available in that free pool versus the possibility for some IXs that may come down the line maybe 2 years from now. So
Sure.
we're just wanting that, if we were to do this, everyone understand that, there are small providers who may not get that last dip at the well.
And these are small, typically small IXPs that want to get a dip at the well as well, and they're aggregating those same small providers. I think that you'll also see some benefit with respect to aggregation. That's kind of a red herring actually, but at the end of the day, everybody's small and wants a piece of the pie. I think there's multiple reservations that we could pick away at and debate if they're necessary or not. I believe this is the smallest one out of the reservations that we have, and perhaps we go look at the, I don't know, what are the other pools? We could go look there and we could take a 16 and move one from the other, and I guess there's technically no impact on the existing pre-pool. As well, there's a /11 coming from the IANA that'll extend the life of the existing free pool significantly. So I really don't think that this is that big of a deal. If it is, let's revisit it in a year and a half or two and rewrite it, and I think that you'll have less agreement or more agreement if it's 70/24s out of a 16 and we go out of a 15 and we go back and take a 16 away. I don't think you'll have any opposition at all. But I think that there's a lot of, again, if you look at the ramp rate, if you look at the potential, I think critical infrastructure has always been distinguished with respect to the internet. I don't think there's any argument that TLDs and IXPs are critical infrastructure. Again, if you're concerned that it's too big, remove the TLDs from the policy and leave the IXPs in it. That's the compromise, in my opinion.
Thank you for your comment and support.
Hi, Kathy Aronson. I have a question for people in the room. It seems to me that maybe some of the current IXP providers are actually getting their /24s from the free pool and not from this pool. And I just wondered if when we run out, maybe the take-up rate for this allocation is going to get bigger because of that. And we should consider that.
Yeah, that would be a good thing to dig into for our.
We can look to see, recognize that we don't have a lot of people coming to us specifically as a new GTLD provider looking for address space.
But I think you were
I'm
talking
talking about GTLDs aren't included in this, so I'm just talking about like exchange providers. Are they currently getting blocks from a block they already have or from the free pool? Not from this
I see.
critical.
Are there providers making, if you're an exchange provider and you're already associated with an ISP or a hosting company, you're often taking a block and just utilizing that.
Right. And
so I don't, sorry, go ahead.
So when we run out, the free pool runs out and those service providers don't have blocks anymore, the take-up rate for this, for like exchange points might grow more than it has.
Quite possibly. It is true that we are seeing a lot of exchange point activity, and there may be even more we're not seeing, which is presently being satisfied by existing allocation policy.
Thank you. By the way, does that address your question, or did you want us to potentially seek that, for San Francisco, seek that data if it's mineable?
Well, I thought since we're in an audience of internet service providers that somebody might be able to speak to that, like I'm an exchange point operator and I get my /24s for exchange points from my current whatever. I just thought.
That would be great feedback, so encourage that. Anyone else wish to make a comment? Kevin? David would like to make a comment?
I'll just say that it is fair, personal experience on an exchange, we started up in somebody's block, and then once we, proved that we can actually get the exchange going, then we went to ARIN, because like nobody wanted to fill out the paperwork if this was going to fall on its face. There's some precedent for what you're talking about. That does occur.
Okay, so there's no further comments. I think we will close this off, and I think, do we have room for one more or before break? Okay. Thank you for the feedback on that.
Thank you. It has occurred to us that we have a break coming at 11 o'clock, but there's 14 minutes and we only have one draft policy left. So we may actually be able to finish prior to break, which would be wonderful in many ways. We've lost the cursor. It's on a screen. Oh, there it is. Aha, thank you. It's on the screen you can't see, which is the other screen. Okay. Next policy, draft policy, ARIN 2014-22, remove the minimums in section 4.10. This is just a draft policy, so I'm going to turn it over to the AC to present. And I see Kevin's behind me. Let me get this up. It's in preview. Got to push it to the other screen? Okay. Got it. It's coming. I found the mouse. Okay. You got to be a little careful with window size. You might have to readjust after a while, but it's creeping. Go ahead.
No problem. So this is ARIN 2014-22, removal of minimum in section 4.10. So effectively, the problem statement is 4.10 is for getting small blocks of IPv4 for your IPv6 deployments. It's a /10 pool that is available to ARIN customers. When there's nothing left in the free pool, and this is the last little sort of reserved special use block for kickstarting your critical infrastructure, as an example. So the problem statement is basically the minimum allocation and assignment in this section is a /28. And from an operational standpoint, that's an unroutable block. There's been some very recent studies that are showing a 28 is 10% routable at best. 25 might be 15%. It's gotten worse, not better, actually, over time. So this would change the policy from the 28 to what has sort of, in the NRPM, become sort of the de facto minimum, which is 24. It basically sets out that that is what it will be. Okay, so there's the text, keep it very simple. Okay, and there's, sorry, it was only 13% for /25. PPML discussion, no advantage. ISPs will react quickly to allow longer prefixes. So we've got a bunch of ISPs, I'm hoping, in this room. I'd love to hear if there's a specific block that is assigned, there is a specific block, a /10, would you open up your prefix filters, as an example, to allow 28s to flow through on that specific /10? Is that a reliable and is that something that we can expect to see quickly? This block is intended for a lifeline. That lifeline ideally would not be attached to an anchor, basically talking about the routability. Next step, so we're requesting feedback. Do you agree with the problem statement? Do we need to change the allocation size? Are you concerned about reachability of these prefixes?
Okay, our last opportunity for the day to give some feedback, so please approach a microphone with your feedback for the AC on this. Front microphone, please, sir.
Morning, Donnie Roisman with SoftLayer. Can you go back the policy language? It was only up for just a second. There we go. Alrighty. Okay. I fully support this change, and I do agree that the minimum allocation should be a /24 because the reality on the internet is that a /28 is not of much value.
Okay. Thank you for that support. A little jigging here at the mics. Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Lee Howard, Time Warner Cable. The proposed language says this block will be subject to an allocation of /24. It does not say to a minimum of /24. That means you get a /24, done. Nothing larger. Whereas the current policy says maximum size of /24.
Right. So further down in the policy, it says you can only get an allocation from this reserved pool every X. So yes, it would be, in my reading of it, that would be the case.
Okay. I think I do believe that the reason we designated a /10 for this purpose is specifically we said /10, this /10 was so that filters would be updated. However, I'm trying to do the math in my head of how many /24s there are in a /10, and it's quite a few. It's probably as many as there would be organizations who need translation technologies, and therefore this is probably effectively harmless, and it simplifies things, so I would support it.
Support. Okay, thank you. Next one, please.
Mike Sinatra, yes, and I also support it. The notion that ISPs may eventually change their policies in order to allow /28s is, if it does happen, it's not going to happen in the time frame where this block is actually necessary for people to use. So I actually think that it's very necessary to make this policy change, and I support it.
You support. Thank you. Remote participant.
So, can you hear me? Good. I have two comments here. One, Andrew Dahl, ARIN AC. One thing we must note is that if we change the minimum, I think it would be from a /28, we greatly reduce the number of possible organizations that can benefit from this policy. Second one is Gary Burmeister. Speaking for myself, this proposal appears to presume that ISPs will not update their filters. To help me understand whether I need to support this proposal, can I request a straw poll, hands up, of those in the room asking how many orgs there are or will be updating their filters to allow a /28 from the assigned /10 prefix, and how many will not be updating their filters.
So instead of a straw poll, perhaps that might be a useful question to take to the PPML from the Shepherds so that we get a wider sample.
Sounds reasonable to me. I was just reading the...
No, understood. And that's hopefully he's hearing me through the audio cast, so I think that would be the best. And did you want to respond to the other one? Go ahead.
So actually, I just wanted to respond to that. One of the aspects of 4.10 is for critical infrastructure. One of the issues is some of the people doing there, or most of the people doing the /28 filters, is that good enough when it's for critical infrastructure? So just to comment on that.
Thank you. Please approach the mics, so we'll be closing them soon, but front microphone, sir.
Joe Provo, Google support is written for all the pragmatic reasons that have already been pointed out. I mean, at one point in time, it may have been of interest to try to expand V4 life and hope a lot of people would update their filters, but you know, V6 is so functional now, that's a silly thought.
Okay, and if there's last chance, please approach a mic if you wish to comment, otherwise we will close the mics.
No one else wants to talk, I will.
If you don't stand up now, all right, the microphones are closed, and remote if there are, please finish off. Last comment to you in the room.
Michael Sinatra, yes, and once again, ARIN policy should not be dictating operational practice, so even if ISPs are required to change their filtering policy, which imposes costs on them because it means they have to carry a larger routing table. It may not be that much larger if they only accept 28s from this block, but it's still larger. ARIN policy should not be dictating operational practice in this manner. So regardless of whether you think they're going to do it or not, I think they're not, but it shouldn't be dictated by this policy.
Understood. Thank you, sir. And if there's no more participations being typed, I think we will close this off, and thank you to the Shepherds for their thing. That I think concludes, and I'll invite John, I think, for closing comments.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Okay, that concludes our policy consultation. Hit the cursor from there to here. Get some new, fresh slides up. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We're going to continue discussion of these on the public policy mailing list, and I will see you all at ARIN at the ARIN 35 meeting, 12th through the 15th of April in San Francisco. Thank you, everyone.